If you want to help Myth Vision Podcast grow, you can join our Patreon. There are different tiers, as well as help out with PayPal. Thank you so much. Don't forget to like, subscribe, share, and comment. Dr. Price, Doug Gordon on my Myth Vision radio group on Facebook, he says, what's the best way to submit a question to Dr. Price? You got it right, Doug. Just message me, let me know, and you can even try to message Dr. Price. But this is good for the shows. He says, I've been trying to understand what Christianity looked like prior to the influence of Paul. Good luck. Could the Didache be used for such a purpose, seeing that some scholars say it is a product of the first century? Thank you in advance.
Oh yeah, I've been saying that even today, that it seems to attest a form of the Eucharist that is very different, that wouldn't exist if the stuff we read in the New Testament was the original state of things. I think it would be like, as I've also said recently, it would be the same as the Qumran community, and that it would have been led by the three pillars, who themselves were the mediators between heaven and earth, as their titles suggest, and that Jesus was imported as a result of the compromise with Paul, which originally had more to do with than just whether Gentiles had to keep kosher, though that would have naturally been part of it. And that Paul was Simon Magus, and that when he joined them and tried to fuse the movements, there was limited success. The Jewish Christians did accept Paul's Jesus, but they had to Judaize him, which meant historicizing him. He had to be made into a Jew on earth in the recent past, with a relation to the pillars and the 12, which the pillars were the inner council. And but there were big problems that caused the divide we read about in Galatians. But I think that's what it would have been like. It would have been Qumran Christianity without Jesus yet.
Interesting. Qumran Christianity without Jesus. And this is prior to Paul. Now, Simon Magus, you believe, is Paul in certain places?
Well, I think that was his original identity, and that he had been part of the Qumran Christian community, and he split with them over the issue of the Gentile mission, the simple ones of Ephraim, and that this was an attempt at reconciliation when the Qumran Christian group found itself in terrible financial straits and needed the support of Paul's or Simon's numerous congregations. In fact, it's ironic because the notion that Paul was making it easier, offering cheap grace by not telling his converts they had to keep the Torah, that was what he said, and that's what facilitated him having his own huge public, and made the Jerusalem Christians think, well, we were opposing how he did it, but it worked, and they could save our butts here.
Interesting. So, question on that, if you don't mind going a little further with Paul, because the whole question was pre-Paul, but when did Simon Magus in this narrative happen in history, if you will?
There's this interesting business about how he was active in the 2nd century in various traditions and so on, but others place him in the 1st century, like having miracle contests with Peter in Rome, and then we're told that Simon himself said he had appeared earlier in Judea and was crucified there, though he didn't suffer. It was a docetic thing. And that is preserved in the gospel tradition with Simon of Cyrene carrying the cross. And as Cerinthus thought, Mark was saying that it was Simon who was crucified, though people apparently thought it was Jesus. And so was that an attempt to harmonize the stories that had Simon in the first century with those that had him in the second? Or what? Well, we don't know. And it could be that even, and of course this is speculation, it could be that the Pauline idea of Jesus had everything to do with this report that Simon claimed he had appeared essentially as Jesus earlier, but he hadn't, and yet the story promulgated by Simon/Paul may have been the origin of the Pauline Jesus that he then got the others to accept.
Interesting. I just did a show with David Oliver Smith on another Christ or another Jesus, and he says that the Jerusalem Council, which he agrees with you and Eisenman on the whole Dead Sea sect being the, if you will, opponents of Paul, so to speak, the Jerusalem Council. My question is in the same vein, because this is interesting. I'm sorry that I'm rabbit trailing off of his question to answer this, but do you think that Paul, or whoever the author is here, is telling the truth when they say that the Qumran, or the Jerusalem Council, if you will, broke their contract? They said, hey, we need the money, but after a while they didn't like what Paul's teaching. So now they're trying to go and clean up the mess behind Paul to the same audiences, and they're trying to go to Paul's audiences and say, hey, you better Judaize. You can't just do this. This isn't going to work for us. Do you think they broke their contract with Paul? Or
yeah, probably so. And that's not inconsistent with them needing or wanting the support of Paul's congregations, because that would have, on any reading, you have a situation where they would seem obviously to be endangering that support. Unless, of course, they're trying to Judaize all of them and get their support from them, which seems more likely.
Strip Paul out of the picture.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. So prior to Paul, prior to Simon, prior to that, the Jerusalem Council had existed, and a version, some form, may have existed prior to them coming on the scene, or Paul coming on the scene.
You mean the leadership group?
Right. Do you think they were a Christian type group, or some Messianic Christian followers of a Jesus?
No, I think not. I think that Peter, the rock, was supposed to be the foundation stone of the world, like some said Abraham was, and corresponding to the navel stone in the temple, which kept the Tehom out and prevented it from flooding the world, at least symbolically, and that James and John were Jachin and Boaz, the two pillars in the temple that symbolized the pillars upholding the firmament, and that and there, of course, the axis mundi, the world's spine that connects heaven and earth, the point of which is revelation. There were channels of revelation from God. So it's like Martin Note, N-O-T-H, his redundancy principle that he applies to the Old Testament, but it fits real well here, that these guys were it to begin with, but once Jesus is added, they get shunted to the side. They maintain some importance, though, so they're not omitted from the story. But but now somebody else is the star of it, and that's why once you bring in the 12, who must have been more important in the Qumran days, they can't even keep straight who they were. Much as in the Old Testament, the various lists of the 12 tribes are inconsistent. They don't even have 12 of them in some of the lists.
Right.
And so it seems to me that all these things are easily explicable, naturally explicable, but I also admit it is a speculative house of cards. I don't want to. I notice as I'm reading about Jewish Christian dialogue and the different theologians from the sort of liberal Catholic side are saying, well, we could say this about Jesus to modify the idea of Jesus as the savior of all people, because we want to say that Jews don't really need him. They've got a separate covenant. And so they're willing to change these things. This is just like a paper agreement. You're redefining Jesus, and that implies the whole thing has been that way all along. How can we, what will be the ramifications if we say this? So they're like building the perfect beast. It's like people trying to define the characters in a sitcom they're working on. And they're creating fictive characters.
I love this. So this going as primitive as I possibly can in this speculative mindset here, that the three pillars are what was there originally, and Jesus comes and makes them followers of him, kind of interesting. These three pillars, which may be somewhat symbolic of a lot of things you see in the Old Testament or Hebrew scriptures, but what do you think they believed in the sense of, did they have a celestial figure, Christ? Do you think is there anything we can compare them to kind of give what maybe they were like prior to Paul's very interesting Christology coming into the mix? Is there something you would speculate, were they just Jewish sages who might have had a Christ like a angelic figure, or what do you think they believed?
Well, I am influenced by this book, The Three Temples by Rachel Elior, who talks about the split between the more rationalistic Pharisees and the kind of charismatic, wild Zadokites, who were the Dead Sea Scrolls sect, who had a wider canon. They're the ones whose collections of books contain the testaments of the 12 patriarchs, the books of Enoch and Baruch and stuff like that, and their own new Torah, the Damascus document. Jubilees was also a kind of a rewrite of Genesis. And that this was just the kind of thing the Pharisees were trying to eliminate. The way they viewed the cherubim and Eden, and also Margaret Barker talks about that in her books, especially The Gate of Heaven, about the temple and its symbolism, and the Older Testament, and even the great angel. And she says there are all sorts of remnants and vestiges of a pre-Deuteronomic, wilder view that was suppressed. And that's why I think the Deuteronomic reform was the split between the Pharisees and the Zadokites in the 2nd century BC. I'm way out on a limb on that, but it seems to me just hard to deny, and the only thing that makes that seem implausible is the standard date, even the current later dating of the Pentateuch and of the Septuagint, as Russell Gmirkin says, that he accepts a 3rd century BCE date for that, putting it in the 200s, because it's tied to Ptolemy Philadelphus II and an old legend that he's the one that had it translated. And I don't buy that. I think his argument is predicated on a kind of shaggy dog story trying to explain why the translators used an uncommon word for rabbit, believe it or not. He says that Ptolemy's wife was the object of all kinds of gossip, that she was sexually promiscuous, just like in the Christmas Story movie, where Ralphie says his father could change the fuses in the basement quicker than a rabbit on a date. Well, the rabbit says promiscuous, and so that if they use the translators figured, if we even use the word for rabbit, we could be in big trouble, and so they chose a word that meant shaggy foot, which could refer to a rabbit, but was an unusual term for it. To me, that seems absurd, actually. That Ptolemy is sitting down with the Septuagint, he's reading through the thing, and he says, "What's this? Rabbit? What the hell? Hey, kill those Jews!" I cannot imagine. It's comical. It's absurd. On the off chance Russell sees this, I'm sorry to say it, but what he's done there is to come up with a kind of a rabbinical shaggy dog story to explain an oddity, and if without that, the connection to Ptolemy Philadelphus II vanishes. I mean, that's the only historical marker, supposedly, and I don't think it is. So I think the Septuagint was done in the first half of the 2nd century, and that's when the Hasmonean thing happened, and the split between the Pharisees and the wild-eyed Zadokites. And so to me, that makes sense. And how the heck did I get off on that? Speaking of rabbit trailing,
what did the 3 pillars believe? So you went from the Zadokites splitting.
Oh yeah, that they would have been these picturesque, technicolor, wild, Qumran type Jews as we see them in the Dead Sea Scrolls. While they're having their liturgy, the angels are singing the same hymns on high, and that they believed there would be messiahs, maybe more than one, and they had the menu for the messianic banquet. They expected Melchizedek to come out of heaven, and that he could be called Elohim, and so forth. So it's all of this fascinating stuff, and that's what they believed. And this is why you see the Book of Enoch quoted in Jude, for instance. It was all this stuff was still around, and so that's what I think. They weren't just pious Hasids like the Pharisees were. And they were Hasidim of another kind. That just means the pious ones. There are various modern movements that are called Hasidim that are very different. But some of them are into wild Kabbalistic mythology and so on too. And I think we know the Qumran people believed in Merkava mysticism. You could ascend into heaven in a vision or descend, I don't know why they thought that, but you would descend to the Merkava, the throne of God, as Ezekiel had seen, and so on. They must have, I think the early Christians believed in that. That's kind of what Stephen sees when he's being killed, and so on. So that's kind of what I think, to us, wild, sectarian, mystical, apocalyptic, ascetical kind of Judaism.